Hey, GRT here, and welcome back to another video. In my last video I covered how to reserve your IP address for your PlayStation 4 within your router, and then how to actually make sure that your PS4 is in a DMZ within your router. This video is how to create a static IP address within your PS4 so that you can input that address into the DMZ of your router. I don't like this method as much as I like the other method, and that is because, like I said previously in my last video, if you try to unhook your PS4 from this network and bring it over to a friend's house, all your information when you created a static IP address will most likely be deleted. Sometimes it doesn't, but most of the time it does get deleted, and then when you get back home, you have to reset up the static IP address rather than just plugging in the PS4 and it's automatically connected already. That's what a reserved IP address does. Again, there are risks for DMZ. I stated the risks earlier where it puts your console outside the router's firewall, and this actually places your console for all to be seen throughout the internet. However, if you don't surf the web through your console and you don't save any bank account information on your console, you're good to go. In fact, you probably shouldn't even save your bank account information on the PlayStation 4 anyways. I would just go to the store and buy a PS card or a PS Plus card, whatever it is, and just buy those from the store, come home and input the code. It's a lot easier. You just put it in your wallet and you don't have to worry about someone stealing your information. Well, anyways, without my rant going on, if you don't know how to get into your router, that is in my previous video. You need to look at that portion of the video. I'm not going to cover it in this video. It just takes way too long. I'll just leave a link down in the description below to that video. Also, at the end of this video, I will leave kind of like a little video ending clip that will link to that video as well. In case you don't like this method, you can go back to the reserve IP address method. The next video will cover port forwarding. I don't recommend port forwarding as much as DMZ, and I'll cover that again in the next video. Now, this is Infinite Warfare. I didn't demonstrate this in the last video, but I have a NAT type moderate. And to be honest with you guys, I had to make it moderate because I have two different gaming routers. These guys, if you have a gaming router, it performs very well. And usually I have it wired because it's like 2 feet away from my router. In order for me to make it a moderate NAT type, I decided I had to go to Wi-Fi settings. And in Wi-Fi settings, for whatever reason, it has a difficult time of keeping a NAT type open. So if anybody watching this video is having issues with their NAT type either being strict or moderate and they use Wi-Fi, this video will really help you out. Again, for demonstrative purposes, I am on Wi-Fi. The same process works for LAN cable as well. So even though I'm going to go through a setting portion of Wi-Fi, you just have to follow the same steps in the LAN cable when setting up your IP address. There are some very important steps in this video. Do not skip any steps, otherwise you could really mess up your network when it comes to PlayStation 4, which is easy to reset. You just have to do a different setting like easy mode or whatever. But again, just follow the steps step by step and you'll be good to go. So what I had forgotten to mention earlier was this can be done for any console, whether it's a Wii, Wii U, PlayStation 3, PlayStation 4, Xbox 360, Xbox One. The only difference is how to actually find the settings in the console. That's about it. In your routers, they should all be approximately the same. You can find DMZ under most WAN or WAN settings. That's pretty much it. So in order to actually create a static IP address, you're gonna have to go over to Settings, Network, set up internet connection. Then you can either use Wi-Fi or use a LAN cable. Remember, I used Wi-Fi at the beginning of this video to demonstrate a NAT type moderate. So I'm going to use Wi-Fi again to demonstrate how this actually works even with Wi-Fi. I usually use LAN cable and do the same method if I was going to do static IP address. The only difference though is that it'll be trying to search for the Wi-Fi connection. You have to input a password versus LAN cable's already connected. You don't have to do all that. So again, if you have a LAN cable, you're using wired connection, and you choose to use this method, follow the same instructions, just don't use Wi-Fi, use the LAN cable. So I'm using Wi-Fi. After you hit Wi-Fi, all you have to do is either hit easy or custom. If you've already reserved your IP address in the last video, this is where you'd hit easy, but we did not, I'm assuming we did not reserve the IP address in this video. So we're going to go to custom to create the static IP address. Before that, it's going to ask you about what router you're going to have to connect to. Mine is Avatar, so I'm going to hit Avatar. Here it's going to ask you whether you want the system to automatically generate an IP address or you have to put it in manually. Here you're going to have to put manually or hit manual. The first part is the IP address. This is your console's IP address, which will be, in my case, 192.168.0.150. This is my console's IP address. This is the one that you make up. This last set of numbers, 150, can be a 2, could be a 1, could be a 200, could be 100. Just make sure that these first 3 set of numbers remain the same as your router's IP address. Remember, if you don't know how to get into your router's information or settings, that is in my last video. I'll leave a link down in the description below or at the end of this video. Just make sure, again, it is very, very important that you keep these 3 numbers, 192.168.0 or whatever your router's first 3 sets of numbers are, the same as your IP address you're creating for your PlayStation 4. The last set of numbers for your PlayStation 4, the 150 that I have here, can be anything. I recommend anything more than 100 if your router is capable of doing it. So I'm going to hit done. Here, the subnet mask. Typically, the subnet mask is usually 255.255.255.0. Some cases it changes, but in most cases it's these sets of numbers. What you can do to verify that this information is correct is use the IP config that I demonstrated in the last video, and you'll see your subnet mask in the command prompt after you've typed in IP config. That way it ensures that the subnet mask is the same. Here mine I know is 255.255.255.0, so I'm going to make sure that everything's good. Hit done. Default gateway is your router, what you're connected to. Mine is 192.168.0.1. Remember, I stated earlier about the PlayStation 4's IP address that these 3 numbers have to be the same. Same case. And the 0.1 just means that the routers, that's the first IP address that's assigned to the router itself. Now the primary and secondary DNS I'll talk about later, but what I do is I set my primary DNS as my router, 192.168.0.1. Some people will change this, some others won't. I use Google servers within my router, and I'll show you guys the DNS servers that I use in a future video. This helps so it doesn't create conflicts because the router typically finds the proper DNS for you versus the PlayStation 4 trying to find it itself. So again, I would just keep the primary DNS the same as your default gateway, and your secondary DNS I would just keep blank. So now we're pretty much done with this section. This was the hard part. And this is the stuff that will reset when you try to connect to another network somewhere else with the same PlayStation 4. It's just a pain in the butt if you don't remember these by heart, these numbers, and it takes forever just to type it all in rather than just reserving your IP address. This is why I recommend reserving your IP address rather than using this method. Then I'm going to hit next. MTU settings, some people choose to change them, but I keep it automatic. Proxy server, do not use. And now I'm going to test my internet connection. Mind you, my NAT type might fail. If it fails, that means, okay, in this case it did not fail, that's a good thing. But I'm going to show you another example here in a bit what a NAT type failed means after performing this step. Usually it'll say something like NAT type failed, there's something wrong with your connection, but I'll show you how to fix that in just a second. Okay, so now we are done with the PlayStation 4, and now we have to go into our router settings. Remember the IP address that you use for your PlayStation 4. In this case, mine was 192.168.1 or 0.150. So this is actually the test that failed earlier on me. When it takes a long time for the NAT type to assess itself, that means it's most likely going to fail. It's not a big deal. It just hasn't established a proper IP address within the router yet. It'll still stay connected online. What you'll need to do next is in the next section where you will establish the IP address within a DMZ on the router. Again, don't worry if it said failed. We'll fix that issue after we get done with the router. If anything else fails at this point, whether it's the IP address, internet connection, PlayStation Network sign-in, that means something went wrong with your IP address. If any of those things failed, that just means that you mixed the numbers up somewhere, you didn't input the correct numbers, whether it's the PlayStation first three sections, or you just put in the wrong router IP address, or you mixed the PlayStation IP address with the router IP address. Something went wrong with that issue, and that's easily fixable. Alright, now we are in our router settings. Remember, if you don't know how to get into your router settings, I will go ahead and leave a link down in the description below to my previous video on how to reserve an IP address, because at the beginning of that video it shows you how to figure out your IP address for your router and how to actually get into your router settings. That is very important, so again, link in the description, go back and look at it, and then you can come back to this step if you choose to use this method rather than the reserve IP address method. Both methods should only take you about 2 to 3 minutes. I just highly recommend the reserve IP address method over this method anytime. Okay, so now we are actually inside our router settings. What you need to do first is you got to go to your advanced settings. Then you have to go to setup, hit WAN setup, and now we have the default DMZ server. Right here, you must check that. After clicking default DMZ server, you will see a set of numbers. These numbers might be different depending on what router you have. Mine says 192.168.0.0. I'm going to change the last set of digits to match my PlayStation 4's IP address that I created when creating the static IP address. Next, you're going to have to hit apply, and then it'll go through a whole restart phase. But this is very important because this caused me to get a NAT type failed if you do not do this next step. After the router restarts itself, you must unplug the modem and router and then plug them both in after 30 seconds. You must wait 30 seconds and then plug them both in. Then they will load back up, and any errors that was associated with either the modem or the router will be fixed, and you will not have, in most cases, will not have a NAT type failed. If it does fail again, I wouldn't worry about it too much, as long as when you get into Call of Duty it says NAT type open, you're good to go. But if it continues to fail over and over and over after several resets, there's something wrong with the network, and it could be any variable that could be causing that. But again, we'll hit apply here. It's gonna reset. It takes up to about a minute and a half. And then I'm gonna have to unplug both my modem and my router and wait 30 seconds after the router initially restarts. Okay, so now we are back on the PlayStation 4. I restarted the router and I actually unplugged both my modem and router, waited 30 seconds, and then plugged them both in. It finally connected back to the PlayStation 4. And so now we are going to go see, we're going to test our internet connection and see what it comes up with. So go to network, test internet connection. It might take a while initially. It might fail, it might not. In this case, it didn't fail. And it looks like we're successful. Again, don't trust the internet speeds. Don't even worry about that. Go ahead and back out. Now what you want to do to make sure that everything worked well and that your IP address is correct, go to view connection status. Here, you need to look up your IP address to make sure that it is the correct IP address that you inputted into the router. It says the IP address for my console right now is 192.168.0.150, and everything was correct. I had a correct NAT type, it didn't fail. So again, this setup is perfect. To make sure everything worked correctly, we are now going to head into Call of Duty Infinite Warfare. Let it load. And I just wanted to make a few other notes. You can either start with the router's DMZ and just plug in a number that you want to assign your PlayStation 4. Just make sure you remember it. And then you can go to your PlayStation 4 and set up the static IP address. You don't have to do the PS4 first and then the router's information. You can do the router first and then the PlayStation 4. I did it somewhat backwards. Most times you just want to start with the router, but it doesn't really matter because I know what my router's IP address is, so it didn't really affect me any. Alright, so we were successful. The NAT type is open, and that's all you really needed to do to perform this DMZ. It really does not take very long at all to get all of this set up. Again, my next video will be the port forwarding video. Also, if you have an ASUS, the DMZs are all the same. You still perform the same method that I showed you here on the PlayStation 4, except for whatever router you have, you just have to try to find the DMZ setting inside your router. The ASUS, if you have an ASUS operating system, or an ASUS router I mean, and you use an ASUS operating system, then you can look at my previous video, how to reserve the IP address, because I actually do the DMZ part in that video as well. I'm not going to go through with it again in this video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please leave a like. I'm actually going to ask for people to rate these types of videos now, just so leave some kind of feedback, something that I can work on that's a little bit better. This whole commentary was kind of like a one-take commentary. I will try to edit parts out, but for me to actually get it to flow right with the video, I'm gonna have to try to keep it all the same, even all my verbal screw-ups. So again, if you like the video, leave a like. If you see something I need to improve on, leave it down in the description or in the comment section below. Don't forget to check out my reserve IP address video. I highly recommend that over this option any day. The reserve IP address is a way better option than going through the whole static IP address system. If you have any questions or concerns, again, leave them down in the comment section. I'm going to try to get to them as soon as I can. This is JRT, and as always, I'll see you next time.